What's up guys, welcome once again to my YouTube channel, Great Check, and once again this is Jerry, and we're gonna be talking about another topic in this video once again, and it's all about the Revelation's mother of all battles. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Do you know where that phrase comes from? That is the official slogan for the Star Wars movies. That line provides us with a good introduction for our study in this video. What we're going to study in this video took place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. We're going to study the mother of all Star Wars in this video. What we're going to study in this video is not a fiction. We're going to be studying the truth from God's Word. We're going to study the battle that began all other battles, the first and greatest war. Let's travel in our imagination in this video several thousand years ago to the very center of the universe, the throne of the eternal God. Take your Bible and turn to Revelation chapter 12 verses 7 to 9. This is the biblical account of the mother of all battles. The Bible says, and there was war. There was what? War. Where? In heaven. The mother of all battles began in heaven. We usually think of heaven as being a place of peace and bliss. Here the Bible pictures war in heaven. The reason there is conflict on earth today is that there was once conflict in heaven. The reason we have conflict on this earth or in our homes or in our hearts is because there was once conflict in heaven. Let's read now the full passage. Here we see the mother of all battles. Where did it occur? In heaven. Now that war has been transferred to earth because the contestants were cast out into our world. Let's see that from Jude chapter 1 verse 7. Mark it in your notes. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuked thee. So the same battle that was once fought in heaven is now taking place on planet Earth. The war that began in heaven is now raging on earth. The first was fought in heaven, the last war will be fought on earth. That leads to a whole bunch of questions. First of all, how did the devil and his angels get into heaven? What were they doing up in that pure and holy place? Second, where did the devil come from? Third, did God create the devil? If so, then isn't God in some sense responsible for all the sin and suffering caused by the devil? Fourth, why doesn't or didn't God just destroy the devil and his angels? Fifth, why did the devil come to this world? Did God create earth as a trash can into which he could dispose of the devil? Sixth, why is there so much suffering in our world? Finally, if God is so good, then why is our world so bad? If God is love, why do good or innocent people suffer? Why are babies sometimes born defective? Why does God allow evil men to carry innocent children away to abuse and kill them? Why does God allow our loved one to suffer a lingering illness? Why does He allow thousands of human lives to be snuffed out in a disaster? Why did He allow that innocent child to run out into the street in front of a speeding automobile and get killed? If God is love, why do I have so many problems and heartaches in my life? Why? Have you ever asked a question like, why, God, did you allow that to happen? Today in this video, we want to find some answers to these questions. As we look around our world today, we see a world of contrasts. We see joy, but we also see sorrow. Pleasure, but there is also pain. Plenty, but also famine. Life, but also death. All over the world we see these contrasts, good and evil, and the natural world offers us no adequate explanation for the existence of the good and evil. It's only when we take the Bible that we can find the answer for the existence of evil in our world. The Bible reveals to us that God is the author of love and blessing. Satan, on the other hand, is the author of hatred and suffering. God wants us to be happy. He wants to bless our homes, our marriages. If we're married, bless our families, our health. He wants us to be happy, and He wants us ultimately to be saved. On the other hand, though, there is the devil. He wants to destroy our happiness, destroy our homes, destroy our marriages, destroy our health, and he wants to ultimately destroy us with himself in hellfire. And because we live on planet Earth, we often find ourselves caught up in the conflicts between God and the devil, good and evil. We sense God at work in our lives, but we also sense the devil sometimes afflicting us. Since you were born on planet Earth, you were born on a battlefield, the conflict between God and the devil. So who is responsible for all the bad things in our world? Not God. The Bible reveals that all the evil in the world is a result of the devil's acts. The Bible reveals to us a God of love. Let's read that from Jeremiah 31 verse 3. The Lord had appeared of old unto me, saying, Yea, I have loved you with an everlasting love, therefore with loving kindness I have drawn you. A loving God once created a perfect world. There was no sickness, no suffering, no pain, no death, no evil. Where then did all the bad things come from? An enemy, an intruder came into that perfect world. And that intruder, of course, was the devil. All suffering, all evil is directly or indirectly a result of sin. And who brought sin into the world? The devil. So who do we blame for the evil in our world? The devil. Some people say God must be mad at me because all these bad things are happening to me. No, the bad things don't come from God. The bad things come from the enemy, Satan. We blame him for all the problems, all the evil, all the suffering in our world today, and not God. The Bible pictures him as a roaring lion. We see that picture in 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 8. If you heard that a man-eating lion who had already eaten numerous people was in your part of the city, would you be more careful as you came and went? There's a man-eating lion out there. His name is Satan. Let's read the text now. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walks about seeking whom he may devour. Question: who is he after to devour? He's after us. To avoid being devoured or destroyed by the devil, we need to know who he is and where he came from. Where did the devil come from? And why did God allow him to come to planet Earth? We'll begin with the question of where the devil came from. Jesus answers the question in Luke 10:18, and he said to them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. So the devil came from where? From heaven. What was the devil doing in heaven? The Bible reveals to us a most tragic story, the story of a fallen angel. We can read that story from Ezekiel 28 verses 12 to 15. Mark that down. Here, using the symbolism of the king of Tyre, God describes Lucifer. By the way, Lucifer is Latin for light bearer. And when God made him originally, that's what he was, the bearer of the light of God. Let's begin with verse 12. Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 12 says, Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyre, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, you seal up the sum, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. We can tell this is describing Lucifer because it says in verse 13, You have been in Eden, garden of God, every precious stone was your covering. You are the anointed cherub that covers, and I have set thee. So you were upon the holy mountain of God. You have walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Verse 15, You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created, till iniquity was found in thee. So when God made Lucifer, He made him how? Perfect. Based on that fact, I have an important question to ask you. Did God create a devil? No. God created a perfect angel. Well, what happened then? You see, God gave to Lucifer and to all the other angels freedom of choice. God wanted the angels to love and obey Him because they choose to. God didn't want robots. He could have made robots if He had wanted to. He could have put a computer chip in those angels' heads so they could not disobey. But God didn't want robots. You parents, how would you like to have a robot for a child? You could name him Ruby. Ruby, eat your greens. Yes, Mama. Ruby, do your homework. Yes, Mama. Ruby, help me in the garden. Yes, Mama. Ruby, go to bed. Yes, Mama. And you could program Ruby to do whatever you wanted him to do. You could program him to get up every morning at the same time, come into your room, throw his arms and around you and say, I love you, Mama, I love you, Papa. He'd never disobey. Wouldn't you like that, parents? No. We want to have our children to love us because they choose to, not because they have to. And that's exactly what God wanted with His angels. God wanted the angels to obey Him because they choose to. So He gave them freedom of choice. Now, don't miss the following. If there is no ability to make a wrong choice, then there is no true freedom of choice. God wanted the angels to serve and obey Him out of voluntary free choice because of their love for Him. But when God gave the angels freedom of choice, He ran a great risk that someone somewhere might abuse that freedom. And of course, that someone was Lucifer. But when God made him, He made him how? You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created. Perfect. That's what the Bible said. Let me illustrate it this way. Here in the Philippines, we have these beautiful coconut plantations. You can make many beautiful things out of the coconut, such as coconut milk. But question, what do some people do with that coconut? Oh, they make wine out of it. And what do people do with that wine? They drink it. And when you drink that wine, something begins to go wrong up here. That man who has been drinking wine might go home with the wrong wife. Or if he does come home, he might beat up his wife or abuse his kids. Who should be blamed for his bad actions? Well, God, of course, because He made the coconut, right? No, God made the coconut perfect. It's the process of fermentation that makes alcohol. Just so a process of corruption begin in the mind of Lucifer. Let me make a point here. There were no external influences that were corrupting Lucifer. Many times we find ourselves surrounded by evil influences. Wherever we go, we see evil. But there was no evil in heaven. Lucifer was in the presence of a holy God, surrounded by holy angels. Neither was there any internal defect corrupting Lucifer. So question, was there any reason or excuse for Lucifer to rebel against God? None. Why then did Lucifer rebel? What caused his rebellion? The Bible gives us the answer. In Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 17, it says, "Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You have corrupted your wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay you before kings that they may behold you." What do you call that when one's heart is lifted up because of one's beauty? Pride. Here are the steps Lucifer took in his steps down to destruction. Pride leads to selfishness. Selfishness leads to jealousy. Jealousy to envy. Envy leads to hatred. And hatred leads to rebellion, which breaks out in revolution, which of course is war. The first war took place in heaven, as we saw. What was the root cause? Pride. Pride is probably the root of many of our problems too. Let's read a parallel passage now to the one we just read in Ezekiel. This is Isaiah chapter 14 verses 12 to 14. Mark it down if you are taking notes. And here again we'll see Lucifer's pride and selfishness revealed. Isaiah 14 verse 12 to 14 says, "You are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How are you cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." Lucifer had an eye problem, a problem with selfishness and self. Do we have the same problem? Yes, most of us think about and focus on ourselves and how to please ourselves. Verse 13 said that Lucifer wanted to exalt his throne above the throne of God. He wanted to take God's place and sit on God's throne. Lucifer had a throne in heaven. He was the leading angel, but he was not satisfied to just be an angel. He wanted to be God. And so Lucifer began to spread among the other angels his feeling of discontent. Remember, all the angels had freedom of choice. So Lucifer began a spoiler of the happiness and peace of heaven. For example, what happens if you put a rotten mango with a good one? They all spoil. So Lucifer began to spoil the peace and happiness of all of heaven. You see, Lucifer had an advantage over God in some respects. He could tell lies. God cannot, will not lie. And so Lucifer began to tell lies about God, lies about his character and his motives. God is not giving us enough freedom. We're perfect angels. We cannot do wrong. We don't need laws to govern us. And if I were in charge, I would give you angels much more freedom. And the Bible reveals to us that 1/3 of the angels believed the devil's lies, and the devil meets with even greater success here on earth. You see, we too have freedom of choice, and so the devil comes to people and tells them lies about God. He brings bad things into their lives and then whispers in their ear, "See, God must be mad at you. You must be a bad person. Look what God is doing to you." When really he is the one bringing the evil on them. Or the devil will tell people things like this: "Oh, you don't want to be a Christian. That's too restrictive. You want to have freedom. Freedom to smoke if you want to, or get drunk if you want to, or party all night if you want to." Have you ever heard lies like that? Now think about this. Alcohol is not freedom. Tobacco is not freedom. Disease is not freedom. Sin is not freedom. You will not find freedom in disobeying God. If you want true freedom, surrender your life to God. He wants to bring you true happiness. Don't listen to the devil's lies. Well, eventually the devil's rebellion broke out into open war. We read that in Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 to 9. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon fought against his angels and prevailed not. Neither was there place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. The first war in heaven. He was cast or thrown out where? Right here on planet earth. And who came with him? All his angels, whom we call demons. But why doesn't God just kill the devil and his angels? He could have killed the devil instantly. If God had immediately destroyed the devil and his followers, the universe would have served him out of fear. Rebellion would have spread. Instead of getting rid of rebellion, it would have spread. And so God had to allow sin to be planted, to grow, to reveal its bitter fruits, so that the universe could see the effects of the devil's rebellion. But question, why did the devil have to come here to planet Earth? Why is this world a theater to the universe? As the Bible says in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 9, for we are made a spectacle unto the world and to the angels and to men. Why is the focus of the entire universe on this sin-cursed world? We're going to see why as we continue. You see, when God made the world originally, it was perfect. And the devil saw this newly created world as a vulnerable prize. There were only two people originally, Adam and Eve. And so the devil concluded, if I can deceive Adam and Eve, then I'll take possession of this new world as mine. And no doubt God warned Adam and Eve. Revelation chapter 12 verse 12 indicates, you see, when God made Adam and Eve, He gave them the same thing that He gave the angels. And that was freedom of choice. God wanted Adam and Eve to obey Him because they loved Him. Now mark this. There can be no true love without freedom of choice. For example, you young man watching me now. Suppose some old woman forced you to marry her. Would you love her? I doubt it. Now, what about you women here? Suppose your husband had forced you to marry him. Suppose he came to you with a proposal, a pistol. Marry me or else. Would you love him? I don't think so. True love cannot be forced. There can be no true love without freedom of choice. But to have freedom of choice, you have to have a choice, right? So God gave Adam and Eve a choice. Let's go read it from Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 to 17. Here we're going to read how evil, how sin came into this world. We'll also read about the choice God gave to Adam and Eve. Genesis 2, 16 and 17, the Bible says, and the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day that you eat thereof you shall surely die. Notice what this tree was called, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. There's those two contrasts, good and evil. You see, God did not want man to experience the contrast between good and evil. Evil was a knowledge that God did not want man to have to possess. God didn't want man to have to experience pain, sorrow, suffering, sickness, and death. The tree of knowledge of good and evil was like the door whereby the devil could access this world. And it was as if God told Adam and Eve, don't open that door. If you eat from this tree, you'll open the door to pain, you'll open the door to sorrow, to sickness, to death. There's a thief out there. Don't open the door. Was that a hard test? One tree on the entire planet? That was not hard test at all. Sometimes we fall in the small things. Well, as this sad story goes, Eve the mother of mankind, wandered by that forbidden tree one day, and the devil was there knocking at the forbidden door. Let's read the story from Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 to 5. This is all the way at the beginning of the Bible. You probably don't read the page, do you? Who was speaking through the serpent here? The devil. Did Eve know that this was the devil she was talking to? No. She would have fled if she thought that was Satan. Back in those days before sin, the serpent was a dazzling creature. So Eve stopped to look at this dazzling creature in the tree, and it started talking to her. Verse 2 to 5, the devil was tempting Eve with the same thing. He wanted to be God. He sought to inspire jealousy and discontent in Eve's mind. And the next verse tells us how Eve fell for that temptation. Verse 6 says, a tree to be desired to make one wise. That is the wisdom of evil. Eve found out what kind of wisdom that was. And Adam and Eve made the greatest mistake ever made when they ate from that forbidden tree. They disobeyed God because they did not believe what He said. Adam and Eve opened the door to the devil, and he came in and broadcast the seeds of sorrow, suffering, and death. That very day, Adam and Eve experienced guilt. They were sent out of the Garden of Eden, their home, so that they could not eat from the tree of life and become immortal sinners. And as soon as they had disobeyed God, they experienced guilt, sorrow, suffering, and eventually death. The devil now claimed the world as his possession. Who would come and rescue man from the devil? Who would buy back this world from the control of the tyrant? Thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. Matthew chapter 1 verse 21. The Bible tells us in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Jesus opened the way of escape from the devil and from this world of sorrow and suffering through His death on the cross. Let's go back to our question. Who is responsible for all the pain and suffering and sorrow in our world? Satan is. He is the one that introduced evil into the world originally. He is called that old serpent in the Bible. But I have good news for you. Someday God is going to punish the devil. The Bible tells us that hellfire was prepared for the devil and his angels. We'll talk about hellfire in the future video. But there's another question we need to answer in this video. Why does God allow sorrow and suffering? We know He doesn't cause it, but since He is all-powerful, why does He allow the devil to bring sorrow and suffering upon us? As we look out of the broken window of our lives, that question haunts us. Why does God allow sorrow and suffering? Well, there's probably no complete answer in this life. When we get to heaven, God will give us adequate reasons. But I want to give you 4 reasons today. But I want to give you 4 reasons in this video. Why God sometimes allows us to suffer? If you're taking notes, please mark these reasons. Number 1, to reveal our character. How we respond to adversity reveals what's in our hearts. Let's suppose we have 2 jars up here, and we have labeled each jar honey, but we fill one jar with honey and the other one with apple vinegar. Now they look very similar, but they have different contents, and we've titled them both honey. Now suppose I come along and I tip over one of those jars. What will come out? Whatever is inside. If there's honey inside, honey will come out. If there's vinegar inside, vinegar will come out. You understand the illustration, right? what comes out of you when you get turned over or upset? I'll be honest, vinegar sometimes comes out of me, but if the sweet spirit of Jesus is in the heart, when someone tips me over, I can respond like Jesus did. What came out of Jesus when they were spitting in his face and nailing him to the cross? Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. I pray for that kind of a character, don't you? I've heard people say, if God lets that happen to me, I hate him. I think, well, there's the vinegar coming out. Sometimes God allows us to suffer to reveal our character. What is in our hearts? There's a second reason, though, why God sometimes allows us to suffer. The first reason God allows us to suffer is to reveal our character. Moving on to the number 2, to purify us. Where do they put gold to purify it? In the furnace. In the heart of the furnace, all the impurities of the gold are removed. The Bible tells us in Isaiah chapter 48 verse 10, Behold, I have refined you, but not with silver. I have chosen you in the furnace of affliction. Where does God put us? In the furnace of affliction. Is that a pleasant place to be? Not at all. But what's happening in the fire? We are being purified. So God sometimes allows the devil to afflict us to purify us. Let me ask you, where do they put bread to perfect it? In the oven. But it's hot in the oven. And I'm sure if that bread could express what's experiencing, it would say, Hey, let me out of here. It's hot in here. But what's happening to the bread? It's being perfected. Have you ever said to God, Lord, I don't like this situation? I have, but I recognize what's happening. Now, don't miss this. God does not work on worthless material. If you are not having any problem, no heartaches, no trials, then you have reason to be concerned. Maybe God has set you aside because you are rebelling against Him. But if you are having some difficulties, if you are experiencing some sorrows, you're having some pain in your life, know that God sees in you something valuable. And He's perfecting you for eternal life in glory. And rather suffer all my life here and live in eternity with Jesus than have no problem here and miss heaven. So the second reason is to purify us. The third reason why God sometimes allows the devil to afflict us is to strengthen our faith and experience. The strongest trees in the world are those on the mountaintops that have faced the wind and experienced the storms. Just so, the strongest Christians are usually those who have suffered the most, those who suffered for their faith under the communism or in some other country without religious freedom, usually have a depth of Christian experience that you can hardly find today. The Bible tells in James chapter 1 verse 2 and 3, My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith works patience. So James says to rejoice in trials. I haven't got there yet. I still tend to complain in trials. So God still has work to do on me. But here we are told to rejoice in those problems because we recognize that it strengthens our experience. The fourth reason why God sometimes allows us to suffer is to give us freedom of choice. Some people ask, why does God allow all this pain and suffering to go on? I say, why did He let it start in the first place? It was to give us freedom of choice. If God were to take away all suffering, all sorrow, He would have to take away our freedom of choice, our freedom to choose wrong with the inevitable consequences. The Bible says in Galatians chapter 6 verse 7, Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he shall also reap. For example, a man smokes all his life, he gets lung cancer. And while he's dying in the hospital, he shakes his fist at God. Why are you letting this happen to me? It's not God's fault. He's simply reaping what he has sown. Now don't misunderstand me. Many times innocent people suffer with the guilty and for the guilty. And the greatest example of that is who? Jesus. Was he innocent? Oh yes. Did he suffer? He suffered more than anybody else will ever suffer. The Bible tells us in 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 18 that he suffered the just for the unjust. And there on Calvary's cross we see the climax of the great controversy between Christ and Satan. We see at Calvary the greatest victory in the great controversy. We see what the devil did to the Son of God and what he would do to everyone of us if God would let him. And on the cross, we see what God was willing to do to save us. On Calvary's cross, Jesus gave his life to buy back our freedom of choice. Before Christ's death, we had no choice. We were doomed, but when Jesus died, he gave us back the freedom to choose eternal life or to choose to neglect or refuse eternal life. But through Christ's death, we have the choice. Let's review the 4 reasons why God sometimes allows us to suffer. Number 1, to reveal our character. Number 2, to purify us. Number 3, to strengthen our faith and obedience. And number 4, to give us freedom of choice. Here is a question many people don't think about. Has sin caused God any sorrow or suffering? We usually think of suffering only as how it afflicts us. One Bible scholar said this: few give thought to the suffering that sin has caused our Creator. The cross is a revelation to our dull senses of the pain that, from its very inception, sin has brought to the heart of God. God has suffered more than anyone because of sin. He has suffered ever since sin began, and he suffers with everyone being afflicted by the devil. But probably the most important question for us in this video: where is God when we suffer? If you're having any difficulties, any suffering, any sorrow in your life, mark down this text. Let's read it in Isaiah chapter 43, verses 1 to 2. But now thus saith the Lord that created you, O Jacob, and he that formed you, O Israel, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burnt, neither shall the flame kindle upon you. You might feel like you're drowning in difficulties and problems. You might feel like the dark waters of despair are ready to sweep over your soul. But God says, I am with you. When you suffer, God is right there by your side. And He says, when you pass through the fire, you will not be burnt. The bread is in the oven, and it's hot in the oven, but there's a loving eye on the bread, the baker, the cook, to make sure that the bread doesn't burn. So today you might feel that you are in the furnace of affliction, but know that there is a loving eye upon you to make sure that you don't burn. Now we can answer the question, where is God when we suffer? With us. He is always by our side to go through each difficulty with us. Every pang of sorrow that stabs our heart, first it stabs His. If you want to mark down a cross reference, mark down Isaiah 63 verse 9 and Zechariah chapter 2 verse 8. Some of you may have heard the story of the footprints in the sand. Someone had a dream one night. He dreamed that he and the Lord were standing at the end of his life, looking back over the sands of time. And as he looked back over the sands of his life, he could see 2 sets of footprints in the sand. One set of footprints was his, and the other was Jesus. And he realized that the Lord had been walking by his side all through his life. But notice that several times there was only one set of footprints, and as he looked more carefully, he saw that it was always at the lowest point in his experience. And so he said to the Lord, "Why did you leave me when I needed you the most?" The Lord said, "My child, I didn't leave you. When you see only one set of footprints, that's when I was carrying you through your dark moments. I have never left you." And it is the same with each one of us. God cares for you. He loves you tenderly. Don't listen to the devil's lie. God doesn't care for you. If you feel nobody cares about you, just go to the foot of the cross to see how much God had to pay for your redemption. He cares for you. He promises He will be with you when you suffer. Yes, we live in a world of suffering because the devil is still alive. But someday soon, Jesus will come and put an end to all suffering and all sorrows and take us to live with Himself in heaven. Although it is true that while we live our lives here on the earth, God allows the devil to afflict us, the reason to purify us to heaven, and God does not allow the suffering to destroy us. He only allows what is for our best good. Never feel that God is far away. He is always near. It's when you feel that He is the farthest away, that's probably when He is the closest. Reach out to Him in the dark parts of your life and He will help you. He says, "I will be with you." If you are suffering this time, know that God is suffering with you and He promises to help and comfort you.